Do you know how to handle a notice that you receive from the IRS? I'm Andrew Bosserman, tax attorney and founder of Boss Tax Law, and this video will tell you how to handle an IRS notice you receive, the step-by-step process I go through, and will also tell you how to get more details in my free ebook available on my website called 5 Steps to Handle an IRS Notice. So the first step is don't panic. It's typical when you receive an IRS notice, to feel that feeling of dread or, get that gut punch when you open the mailbox and see that letter from the IRS. But the first step is don't panic. First of all, not all letters the IRS send are bills requesting more money from you. There are many different types of notices, but, not all are bills. Also, there's plenty of good information out there to help you navigate and respond to any notice you might receive. The IRS follows very detailed procedures when dealing with taxpayers, and all of those procedures, which is called the Internal Revenue Manual, is available on their website. Also, the Taxpayer Advocate is also a good resource to work through. They have a great resource called the Taxpayer Roadmap, which is a graphic that shows the entire IRS process. So those are two great places to start. And just a reminder that there are lots of resources out there to help you, and you don't need to panic when you receive an IRS letter or notice. The second step of the 5 steps is to read the notice carefully. There are many different types of notices, and they can be grouped into a number of different categories, but there are notices for simply processing your return. The IRS maybe sees that some numbers don't match up, or they may have slightly adjusted your refund when they process your return. Those are informational, but there's also notices related to collections. You might owe money to the IRS because you couldn't pay your taxes in full or for some other reason. There's also examination notices, notices having to do with IRS, income tax examinations, the IRS asking you to verify the numbers and other information on your tax return. There are also appeals notices. If you went through an examination or made a claim for a refund and the IRS denied it, you do have appeal rights in most cases, and there are certain sequences of letters that you'll receive in those situations. And kind of the fifth bucket is litigation notices. If you decide not to go to appeals or exhaust all remedies in appeals, then you often do have tax litigation rights. You can take advantage of challenging the IRS in court. And there will be different correspondence you'll receive from the IRS and its counsel at that time. There's also other notices that don't really fit into any of those buckets, but the important thing to remember is that you need to read the notice carefully to figure out what exactly the IRS is asking for, so you know how to respond and why exactly the IRS is sending you a notice. The third step is to analyze your tax transcript. And your tax transcript is, it's kind of similar to a bank account, but it's a record of all the transactions and a record of what the IRS has on your individual tax account. So, for example, say I'm an employee that receives a W-2 from my job. On my individual tax account, it's going to show that I filed a tax return with a certain amount of income reported. It's going to show the withholdings that were taken out of my paycheck as being paid against that tax liability, and it'll also show any other tax payments I made. But it will also show any adjustments the IRS have made that, was different than what I claimed on my tax return. It also might show any penalties or interest assessed. So it's important to always analyze a copy of your tax transcript because it will allow you to understand where the IRS adjustments or notices are coming from. And also oftentimes notices may get also posted or noted on your tax account. And that's known as an account transcript. But there's also another type of transcript, and that is a tax return transcript. A tax return transcript is simply just list or kind of a description in the IRS's system of what your tax return actually looks like line by line. So it's not the actual PDF version of your return, but it's the version of what the IRS took from your return and put into their system. And that's important to sometimes see, you know, what actually the IRS got in their system. Possibly there's some errors when the IRS transposed numbers if you filed by paper. But for most instances, you'll want to look at the tax account transcript, but sometimes tax return transcripts will be useful as well. So the fourth step in responding to an IRS notice is to respond accordingly. And not all notices require a response. Like I said, some are informational and they might just have to do with the IRS adjusting your return. And, if you agree with what the IRS does, oftentimes you don't have to submit a response. But if you disagree, or if the IRS asks for additional information, the IRS will ask you to respond. And it's important that you respond accordingly. Any response needs to be clear and concise so the IRS can understand what you are saying and what you want the IRS to do. And also should be written, in a way that's easy to understand and makes your case well for you. You'll also want to make sure to save a copy of any response as well as a copy of the notices you receive. And also always remember to respond, if you have to respond by mail, to use mail with tracking. Generally, certified mail with return receipt is the preferred method, but sometimes you can also send notices via private delivery services like UPS or FedEx. But generally, Postal Service certified mail with return receipt is the preferred method because you have tracking plus proof of delivery. So if the IRS claims they didn't receive it, you can always pull out the proof of delivery and tracking to say, hey, this is the date I mailed it and the IRS received it. Finally, the fifth step in responding to an IRS notice is don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes as you're going along, you might need some additional help, and there's a wealth of information out there. Like I said, the IRS website, as well as the Taxpayer Advocate, already has a lot of information. Many CPAs and tax attorneys put out a lot of good information about how to deal with the IRS. But if you're looking to hire a tax professional to help you, there's really three main types. And I go into this in my ebook, which you might want to check out the chart I have comparing all of them. But there's really tax attorneys, CPAs, which stands for Certified Public Accountants, and EAs, Enrolled Agents. So tax attorneys, which is what I am, I'm also CPA, but tax attorneys go to law school and they generally focus on legal tax arguments. So oftentimes these are taxpayers dealing with complex issues, whether that be collection, examination, you're under an IRS audit, or appeals and litigation. And oftentimes tax attorneys get involved in appeals and litigation stages because it's really important to have a tax attorney involve them because we really focus on the legal arguments and making your case before the IRS. What's also important is that tax attorneys have attorney-client privilege with clients. So that means that generally all communications with your tax attorney are confidential and can't be disclosed, even in court. Whereas communications with other professionals like CPAs and EIs generally aren't subject. There might be a limited privilege, but generally not subject. CPAs, certified public accountants, they focus on numbers and have an accounting background. Some of them do deal with the IRS, but many focus more on financial accounting and return preparation. Like I said, some do tax representation work, but oftentimes not when you get to the higher levels like appeals and litigation. And generally only tax attorneys can represent you in court, unless CPAs and EAs can, but they have to pass a special exam. And finally, enrolled agents, that's a special designation by the IRS. You have to take a test, but there's no educational requirements unlike tax attorney or CPA. And EAs generally focus on tax preparation and also tax representation. But unlike tax attorneys, there is no attorney-client privilege that's generally reserved to tax attorneys. But definitely check out the chart in my ebook for more detail and explanation. And for more detail on all the 5 steps, check out the ebook that's available in the link below or at my website. But this has just been an overview of 5 steps to handle an IRS notice. Feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions about handling an IRS notice or think I might be able to help you in any way. Or if I can't, I'll definitely try to point you in the right direction. But thanks so much for listening.